The chalk screeched across the board, a riddle no one dared to touch. One by one, the privileged walked away, certain it was impossible. But in the silence, one girl remained. Her voice cut through the air. "I'll try." The room froze, uncertain if this choice would break her or change everything, followed to witness how Maya Torres turned the impossible into history. Professor Harlan stepped back, dust clinging to his blazer, his expression unreadable. Silence spread through the lecture hall. Chairs creaked as students stared at the equation that loomed over them like a mountain. Mathematically model the relationship between systemic inequality and national economic growth over the last half-century. Include political, cultural, and social variables. Deadline, 72 hours. Reward. Joint publication in an international journal. He let the words settle, like a challenge thrown before warriors. A nervous laugh broke from somewhere in the crowd. Then came the murmurs. "This is insane," muttered Charles Whitmore, heir to a banking empire, running a hand through his carefully styled blonde hair. "My father didn't pay 200 grand a year for me to waste time on impossible riddles." He shoved his books into his designer bag. "Who cares about this anyway?" Beside him, Evelyn Zhao, the daughter of diplomats, adjusted her glasses and shook her head. "Too risky. If we fail, our grades suffer. Not worth it." One by one, students began to rise. Chairs scraped against the polished floor as the elite of Belmont University made their retreat. Within minutes, the 40-seat hall had dwindled to just 3 figures. Professor Harlan, his teaching assistant busy stacking papers, and Maya Torres Maya, 20 years old with calloused hands from summers in her mother's sewing shop. She clutched the same pencil she'd carried through high school, worn, sharpened down to a stub. A scholarship student from a neighborhood most of her classmates couldn't find on a map. Her dark eyes studied the board. While the others saw chaos, she saw something strangely familiar. Professor Harlan. Her voice broke the silence. "I want to try." The room seemed to freeze. The professor turned slowly, lips pressed tight, a flicker of surprise in his gaze. Then came pity. "Miss Torres, this is doctoral-level work. Perhaps you should focus on more basic subjects first. With all due respect, sir, you promised publication to whoever solved it. You never said it was off-limits." A hush stretched between them. Harlan exchanged a glance with his assistant. It was the same glance Maya had seen her whole life, in job interviews where she was told she didn't quite fit, in stores where security guards shadowed her steps, in classrooms where teachers doubted her before she even spoke. "Very well," he said at last. His tone carried not encouragement but challenge. 72 hours. No excuses. Maya copied the problem carefully, her pencil moving with steady determination. As she wrote, she noticed something subtle, hidden among the numbers. A clue. A tiny marker most had ignored. It shifted the problem completely. Her lips curved faintly. What the professor didn't know was that this girl he underestimated had grown up living inside the very struggles she was now asked to quantify. That gave her an advantage no privilege could buy. By the next morning, whispers spread across campus like wildfire. The scholarship girl took the challenge. Laughter followed in every corner. Charles tapped furiously in the Belmont Elite group chat. $50 says she doesn't last a day. Evelyn chimed in. "Honestly, this is cruel. Someone should stop her before she humiliates herself." The messages multiplied. Cruel memes attached, jokes traded like currency. But while they laughed, Maya sat alone in the university library, the fluorescent lights humming above her. Midnight slipped past. Then 1, then 2. Her notebook filled with equations, her hands aching, yet her eyes bright with focus. She had lived her entire life being told to be twice as good to earn half the respect. To her, this wasn't madness. It was routine. That faint clue from the chalkboard nagged her thoughts. Buried in the equation was a variable others had missed: resilience factors. The kind of survival mechanisms she'd seen in her own community, where neighbors leaned on each other when institutions failed. She thought of her mother, Elena, who could stretch a single meal to feed 5 kids, who worked double shifts at the hospital cleaning floors but still found time to remind her daughter, "When life gets hard, we don't break, we bend. We find a way." Maya whispered the words under her breath, gripping her pencil tighter. For her classmates, this was a puzzle. For her, it was personal, and she intended to win. The next morning, the lecture hall buzzed with anticipation, not because of the lesson, but because everyone was waiting to see how quickly Maya would falter. Professor Harlan walked in, smiling with a politeness so thin it almost cracked. He had spent the previous night at a donors' dinner, where Maya's attempt had become the evening's entertainment. He carried that same smugness into class. "Miss Torres," he said, his tone lined with false warmth, "I trust you used the last 24 hours wisely. There's still time to reconsider, you know." Pride is costly. Maya met his gaze. Her pulse thudded, but her voice was steady. "Thank you, Professor. But I intend to continue." A ripple of whispers rolled through the rows of students. Some smirked. Others shook their heads in disbelief, and so began a morning of quiet warfare. Each time Maya raised her hand, Harlan fired increasingly complex questions at her, dripping with condescension. Perhaps this is too advanced for those with certain educational backgrounds. Public school students sometimes struggle with abstract concepts. Each remark stung like a lash. Snickers rose from the back rows. Charles leaned back in his chair, whispering something crude that made Evelyn cover her mouth to hide her laughter. Maya sat straighter, refusing to shrink. Every smirk, every dismissive tone only fueled the fire inside her. She thought of her mother scrubbing floors in silence, her back aching but her dignity unshaken. She thought of her younger brothers, who looked up to her like proof that escape was possible. She thought of every "no" she had ever heard. She wouldn't break now. During the break, Charles sauntered over, his smile predatory. "Look, between us," he lowered his voice, though loud enough for others to hear, "why don't you just stop? You've already proved you're brave. Nobody will blame you if you back out." Maya didn't lift her head from her notebook. "And why exactly do you think I can't handle it?" Charles smirked, leaning closer. "Come on, be realistic. My grandfather built one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. My father runs a multinational bank. I've been hearing this kind of talk at dinner since I was 10. You're smart, sure. But this," he gestured toward the chalkboard, "this isn't your world." Maya paused, then looked up slowly. Her dark eyes locked on his with a calm that unsettled him. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "I did grow up in a different world than yours. A world where failure means eviction, where every chance might be the last, where underestimating someone is the most expensive mistake you can make." Her words cut sharper than any insult. For the first time, Charles shifted uncomfortably. That afternoon, Maya retreated to the computer lab. Alone, the hum of the machines filled the silence. She spread her notes across the desk. Years of data she had studied. The personal stories of neighbors who had fought to survive layoffs, evictions, and medical bills. All of it came together like puzzle pieces. The clue she had noticed in the professor's equation, resilience factors, wasn't a mistake. It was the missing key. While her privileged classmates slept in dorms lined with luxury, she worked deep into the night. Her hands cramped, her back ached, but her mind blazed with clarity. Every slight, every cruel laugh, every whispered insult only sharpened her focus. She was weaving lived experience into mathematics, a model that wasn't just numbers, but a reflection of the hidden strength in communities like hers. By dawn, her eyes burned, but she felt something shift. This wasn't just about solving a problem. It was about proving that true genius isn't born in comfort. It's forged in necessity, and Maya Torres was about to show them all. By the second night, the whispers had turned into a roar. On campus, in cafes, in group chats filled with emojis and sneers. Maya Torres had become a joke. She'll quit by tomorrow. Poor thing. She's out of her league. Affirmative action has its limits, right? In the Belmont Elite chat, Charles raised the stakes. I'll host a farewell party. When she crashes, we'll toast to her courage. Evelyn chimed in. Honestly, it'll be a relief. The whole class is tense because of her. The cruelest came from Victoria Ashford, heiress to a publishing dynasty. Someone should film her crying in the library. Capture the exact moment she realizes she doesn't belong. They laughed and placed bets, blind to the fact that every word was reaching Maya's screen, not by chance, but because someone had quietly added her to the group. Jason Kim, a computer engineering major, also on scholarship, who had watched the exclusion unfold in silence. Days earlier, he had said quietly, "They think you're invisible. That's why they don't even hide their cruelty. Here, see for yourself." And now, as Maya scrolled through their messages, she felt something more than anger. Data. Every insult, every smug bet, every cruel joke was evidence. Proof of exactly what she was trying to model. How privilege blinds people, how prejudice shapes decisions, how underestimated communities develop resilience that the powerful can't even fathom. She whispered to herself, "They've given me everything I need." By dawn, the library was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly. Maya sat hunched over a stack of notebooks, eyes red from exhaustion but alive with fire. Her phone buzzed. A video call. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Her mother's tired voice filled the small corner of the study room. Elena Torres had just finished another double shift at the hospital, her hair pulled back, her eyes weary but sharp. Maya managed a small smile. "I'm great, Mom. Actually, I think I've discovered something." "Tell me." Maya explained her theory. How survival networks in poor neighborhoods weren't just social habits, but measurable factors that strengthened communities during crises. Things traditional economic models ignored because they didn't fit elite definitions of data. Her mother nodded slowly, her face thoughtful. "You know, it reminds me of the recession back in '08. The banks were failing, companies collapsed. But our block, we shared food, we looked after each other's kids. We made it through when everyone said we couldn't. Economists on TV never talked about that. But we lived it." Maya's throat tightened. "Exactly. That's what they can't see. But I can." That morning, she wasn't alone in the library. Professor Samuel Ortiz from the sociology department approached her desk with 2 coffees in hand. He was one of the few professors at Belmont who had come through the same scholarship pipeline years earlier. "Word is you're working on Harlan's impossible problem," he said. Sliding a cup toward her, Maya blinked. "He didn't send you?" Ortiz chuckled. "No, in fact he told me to stay away, which is exactly why I'm here." For 2 hours, Maya walked him through her approach. She showed him her equations, how she integrated resilience factors, how she turned community survival into a measurable force in economics. Ortiz leaned back, shaking his head in awe. "You're not just solving his riddle. You're rewriting the field. Do you realize that?" Maya looked at her notes, then back at him. "I don't just think it can work. I know it will. Because it's real." Meanwhile, in the elite dorms, laughter echoed down the halls. Charles finalized plans for his farewell party. Evelyn rehearsed her smug sympathy. Victoria drafted captions for the memes she would share. None of them realized the scholarship girl they mocked wasn't drowning. She was building a storm, and when it hit, it would sweep their arrogance away. The lecture hall was overflowing. Students crammed into seats, professors lined the walls, even the dean slipped quietly into the back. No one came to see brilliance. They came for spectacle. The downfall of Maya Torres. Charles sat front row, his smirk firmly in place as he texted his friends. "Popcorn ready? It's showtime." Evelyn and Victoria sat nearby, eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. Professor Harlan strutted in, posture stiff with self-importance. He glanced at Maya like a man about to deliver a lesson in humility. "Miss Torres," he began, voice cutting through the chatter, "I trust you've used the 72 hours wisely, perhaps to prepare a graceful withdrawal." Maya stood, laptop in hand, calm as still water. "Thank you for your concern, Professor, but I think I've come up with something worth sharing." She connected the cable. The first slide appeared, and the room fell silent. It wasn't just graphs or equations. It was a story woven in data, beginning with a quote from James Baldwin. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Gasps rippled through the audience. Maya's voice was steady, resonant. The problem wasn't impossible. It was incomplete. You were measuring resilience with tools made by people who never had to be resilient. Slide after slide demolished decades of flawed assumptions. She showed how marginalized communities, dismissed as statistical outliers, were in fact engines of innovation under pressure. Her equations captured survival strategies that the wealthy never needed, and therefore never measured. Charles's smirk faded. Evelyn leaned forward, her pen frozen midair. Victoria's face drained of color. Professor Harlan cleared his throat, his voice brittle. "Interesting in theory, Miss Torres, but models require real data. Where are your empirical sources?" Maya's lips curved. "I'm glad you asked." She clicked to the next slide. On the projector appeared screenshots, messages from the Belmont Elite Group chat. Bets, insults, memes. The room went ice cold. Jason Kim stood from the back, laptop open. "Over the past 3 days, many of you have supplied fascinating behavioral data. Data on how prejudice distorts judgment, how arrogance blinds competence, and how privilege creates cognitive gaps." Gasps. Shifting chairs. Charles fumbled for his phone, but Jason was already scrolling through. "Their words on the big screen. $50 says she quits. Tomorrow. She doesn't belong here." Film. Her crying in the library. Each line read aloud landed like a slap. Victoria buried her, face in her hands. Evelyn stared at the floor, pale and trembling. Charles's jaw tightened as laughter dissolved into humiliation. Maya didn't gloat. She simply continued, calm and precise. "This is exactly what my model measures, how prejudice shapes behavior. You've provided the perfect case study." "Thank you." Professor Harlan's face flushed. Sweat trickled down his temple. This is highly inappropriate. Using private conversations." A new voice cut through. Professor Ortiz, stepping forward, briefcase in hand. "Private conversations? Harlan, perhaps you should explain why you discussed her inevitable failure with donors at last night's dinner." Word travels. The hall went utterly silent. Harlan froze, caught between fury and fear. Ortiz set the briefcase on the desk. "Also, Miss Torres's work has already been submitted to 2 major journals. Both have expressed interest. What you just dismissed as theory may soon be peer-reviewed as groundbreaking research." Maya looked at the stunned faces before her. Sometimes genius isn't recognized because it comes from places you refuse to look. But that doesn't make it less real. It makes it stronger. The final slide glowed behind her. Resilience is not anomaly. It is innovation. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the dean rose from his seat at the back. "I'd like to speak with Miss Torres, and with you, Professor Harlan." Now. The hall erupted in hushed murmurs as students shuffled out, eyes averted, shame heavy in the air. Maya gathered her notes quietly, dignity intact, leaving behind a room that would never see her the same way again. The meeting in the dean's office stretched for hours. When Maya emerged, The sun was setting, painting the campus in amber light. She walked out not as a scholarship girl on trial, but as the author of research that would reshape the university's reputation. Professor Harlan did not leave with her. He was suspended immediately, pending investigation for discriminatory conduct and for mocking students in donor circles. The man who had ruled the economics department for decades had been undone by his own arrogance. News traveled fast. By morning, the campus buzzed with the story. The girl who beat the impossible problem. The professor who underestimated her. Students who had once laughed now avoided eye contact. Victoria vanished from social media. Evelyn, shaken, sought Maya out privately, voice trembling. I realize now I've wasted years memorizing formulas without asking what they mean. You reminded me knowledge should serve people, not pride. Maya nodded gently. It's never too late to start. Even Charles's swagger cracked. His family quietly arranged his transfer to a less demanding European school after his grades collapsed. The boy who mocked resilience had no resilience of his own. 6 months later, the university unveiled what students nicknamed the Torres Protocol. Applications were reviewed not only by test scores but by evidence of transformative potential. Courses were redesigned to include perspectives long ignored. Marginalized voices weren't statistical footnotes anymore. They were part of the framework. And Maya. She walked the halls no longer as an outsider but as the dean's research assistant, lead author on a paper that had already shaken the field of economics. The Journal of Social Behavior dedicated an entire issue to her work. Professors across the country cited her model. Invitations to conferences poured in. Yet she remained the same. Girl who carried a stubby pencil in her bag, a reminder of where she began. Her mother attended the commencement ceremony in a simple dress she had saved for months to buy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she watched Maya cross the stage, not only to receive her degree summa cum laude, but also 3 offers: a PhD at Belmont, a position at the World Bank, and an invitation to co-lead a new research institute on economic justice. "My daughter," Elena whispered, "you didn't just exceed expectations, you redefined them." At the graduation reception, a familiar figure lingered at the edges, emptying trash bins. Harlan, the once feared professor now reduced to a temporary custodial job after no university would rehire him. His colleagues turned away, embarrassed, pretending not to recognize the man who had once set their standards. Maya noticed him, but said nothing. There was no need. Her success was louder than revenge. The best justice isn't to destroy your enemies. It's to build something so grand their smallness fades into irrelevance. 2 years later, Dr. Maya Torres sat in her new office at Stanford University, the youngest tenured professor in the department's history. Her second book, Mathematizing Resilience, turning lived struggle into scientific knowledge, had become required reading in economics and sociology programs around the world. Her TED Talks drew millions. Students from backgrounds like hers wrote letters, telling her how her story had given them courage to apply where they once thought they didn't belong. And still, Maya never forgot the night she whispered to herself in a dim library. "We bend. We find a way." One afternoon, there was a knock at her office door. A nervous 19-year-old, the son of Salvadoran immigrants, peeked in, clutching a notebook. "Professor Torres, do you have a minute? I've been working on an idea about resilience in refugee communities." Maya smiled, recognizing in his eyes the same fire she once carried. "Of course," she said warmly. "And call me Maya. The best education happens when we break down walls, not build them." She leaned forward, listening intently. Because the greatest legacy is not the prize you win, but the doors you hold open for those who come after. And Maya Torres had made it her mission to keep those doors wide.